Hello, Starshine. My name is Liz, and this is my channel, Simsational Stories. If you have not seen my videos before and you enjoy this one, please like and subscribe. And maybe check out my Facebook page, where this whole thing began, as well. All relevant links are in the description below, and of course, if you're a Sims player and you'd like to download any of the characters featured in my stories, just search the hashtag Simsational Stories on the Sims 4 gallery. All original content is created by This Is Not Eric. Alrighty then. So, welcome. And what is up, Buttercup? Are you having a good day or a bad day? Whichever your answer, please allow me to distract you from your life and tell you a story, a Simsational story. Before I begin though, I'd like to issue this blanket content and trigger warning. The following story is just Sims, hey. I'm not going to apologise for treating them terribly, if that's what I've done. But I do want to assure you now that although I mean absolutely no harm, I completely understand if you feel unable to consume my content. Many loves, and we will catch each other on the internet elsewhere. Okay, so now we've gotten that over with, let's go. Today's story is a historical interlude, which is a thing I do. It's like, okay, so basically it's a standalone chapter of history for a particular world or story, and I'll be adding it to both the playlist for the story it relates to, as well as an individual playlist of historical interludes. Does that make sense? I hope so, because without further ado, let me introduce you to the Smytheson family. Policeman Gregory Smytheson met his wife Audrey at work. To the general public, she masqueraded as an aspiring chef, but in reality, she was a secret agent. That was why, after only a few short years of marriage, she and he were able to purchase and renovate Dreamweaver's Way in StrangerVille, where their son Sean was born. The couple were delighted to finally have a child together, and doted upon their boy. Audrey, Gregory, and little Sean were living a dream life. Their respective careers kept the couple more than comfortable financially, as well as well endowed with a hearty appreciation of this being the one and only life we have to live. And so they had an almost mythically opulent lifestyle. Holidays like Winterfest in particular were very important to Audrey, as she had grown up as an orphan, and so family really meant something to her. And Audrey really meant something to Gregory. He was a reclusive kind of soul, whose main ambition was to succeed at work. But Audrey had awoken something different in him, something more. From the moment he'd seen her striding across the squad room during the disappearance of Penny Pizzazz, he'd been smitten. She was spectacular, this wonderful wife of his. Smart, beautiful, successful, and altogether far better than he'd ever hoped to dream of finding in a partner. It was almost inevitable that so perfect a love and match could not last. It wasn't right, and it definitely wasn't fair. But if he was honest within himself, Gregory felt like he'd always known this would happen. It didn't help that Audrey was a secret agent. Her life had always been at risk, as had his, of course, albeit to a lesser degree. And so he wasn't surprised when the coroner returned the report that Audrey had been poisoned. That was all later, though. In those final moments, Gregory didn't really think of anything like that. He could only watch in horror as his wife was spirited away from him by forces he didn't dare try to argue with. Poor young Sean wandered in at the last moment as well, and witnessed his mother take her last breath. At almost 5 years old, Sean understood well enough what was happening, and memories of that day would haunt him for years afterwards. And so, Gregory was left haunted and alone. He threw himself into his job. He had always been a dedicated worker who stayed late. Now he practically lived at the office, hiring a permanent nanny who came in each day from 7 a.m. through till 7 p.m. to look after little Sean. He felt guilty for leaving his son behind so often, but a police station wasn't an appropriate place for a young boy to be. He wanted to protect Sean for as long as he could. One thing Sean always remembered from his childhood, though, was that his dad always came home for dinner. Audrey had always done the cooking before she died, so Gregory was a terrible cook, especially in the beginning. But Sean treasured those evenings with his father. He would do his homework while his dad prepared their meal, and then together they would sit and talk about their respective days. Despite the distinct lack of time they spent together, they made every second count, and Sean's dad was his best friend. Another strong childhood memory of Sean's was finishing his homework alone while his father got caught up trying to figure some difficult case or another out. Gregory was more than dedicated to his job. He was obsessed with it. At his example, Sean learnt the importance of responsibility and ambition. Gregory also enrolled his son in Scouts, where Sean quickly excelled. It was fun. Learning how to survive in the wilderness, how to tie different knots, and it was cool to put on a uniform too. Sean liked to think his job at Scouts was just like an earlier version of his dad being a policeman. Sean's only friend growing up was Sky Solomon, a girl from Newcrest he'd met at school. Sky was also her parents' only child, and so she was glad to finally have someone her own age to play with. They would meet up after school at each other's houses and do homework together before playing until dinner. As they grew up, Sean and Sky's friendship only deepened. They were best friends forever now. Both teens were quite intelligent, straight-A students, and very popular. They still did their homework together, but now they were older, instead of playing with toys, they'd just hang out. Of course, it didn't take long for Sean and Sky's friendship to grow into something more. It was only natural. They had known each other almost their whole lives and had been through everything else together. Why not this too? They were each other's first love, and they believed at the time each other's one and only true love. Surely they were meant to be. Everything had always just felt so right and so easy for them, and in their youthful naivety, they thought everything would always be easy for them. As they went through high school, Sean and Sky continued to stay together, never wavering in their devotion to one another. They also never bothered to talk about the future, because they were only young, and they thought more about next week than next year. Besides, they were obviously each other's future, right? Except, maybe not. Sky had decided she wanted to go to the University of Brichester to study culinary arts, but Sean was headed towards the Foxbury Institute for a distinguished degree in psychology to help him become a master detective, just like his father. The two universities were hundreds of miles apart. Sean and Sky loved each other with everything they had, but 4 years of long-distance dating? It was too much for them. They both knew that, and so they came to a mutual agreement to end things when they graduated high school. They left things on good terms, or as good as they could be, and went off to their separate colleges. Sean heard that Sky was doing great at Brichester. She had a 4.0 GPA and was president of the debate club, and within weeks of arriving on campus, she was already dating somebody new. He didn't want to know anymore. It was time he started his new life too. And that brings us to the end of this historical interlude, the Smytheson family. If you've enjoyed this little story, I strongly recommend that first you like and subscribe, of course, but also that you go and check out the playlists on my page to see where this tiny bit of history fits in. Also, maybe check out my Facebook page. Okay, that's it. Bye!